Okay, so we're in Parsha Matos, which is Bamidbar, chapter 35, chapter 30, sorry. Uh, Starts on Pasuk base, verse 2. And I'll just read the first few verses here. We're talking about vows and oaths here. And it seems very straightforward, pretty pashat, but there's something pretty interesting here. If we go to, it talks about the man making a vow or swearing an oath in the first couple of verses, but in verse 4, in verse 4 here, it says, V'isha ki tidor neder laHashem be'asara isar beves avia bin urea. But if a woman will take a vow to Hashem or establish a prohibition in her father's home in her youth, Pasuk He, it says, Veshama avia es nidra be'esara asher asara al-nafsha. It says, and her father heard of her vow or prohibition that she established upon herself, and her father was silent about her, then all her vows shall stand. And any prohibition that she established upon herself shall stand. Verse 6, Vav v'im heini avia osa bayom sham'o. But if her father restrained her on the day of his hearing, all her vows or prohibitions that she established upon herself shall not stand, and Hashem will forgive her, for her father had restrained her. Verse 7, V'im ha'o tiye le'ish, it says, if she shall be married to a man, and her vows were upon her, or an utterance of her lips, by which she had prohibited something upon herself, and her husband heard on that day of his hearing, he was silent about her, then her vow shall stand, and her prohibitions that she established upon herself shall stand. But if on the day of her husband's hearing he shall restrain her, and he shall revoke the vow that is upon her, or the utterance of her lips by which she had prohibited something upon herself, then Hashem will forgive her. So I'm going to talk a bit about this. So we see a daughter making a vow, and possibly a scenario where she's also married. So we're going to go into this. So basically, Hashem created the world through words, and the world can be destroyed through words. We can also heal through words. The souls, the motions, when you make a vow you want to keep, you're not to desecrate it. There is a concept of annulling the vows. To nullify, no longer held responsible. And one of these laws about annulling a vow deals with a father and daughter. So it doesn't really talk about annulling vows. And the Torah is kind of silent on this, but the reason why it's silent about this is through Torah Shabbat Pei, that there is a concept of annulling vows, but the rabbis didn't want to explain this, or the Torah doesn't explain this fully, because then people would be in the habit of just making vows and annulling them like it's no big deal. But it is a big deal. Shira Shabbat Shalom. Just if you're listening, we're on Shabbat Shalom. We're just discussing vows and oaths from chapter 30, verse 4 to basically 9. And
okay, thank you.
No problem. And so we have one of these laws that deals with about annulling a vow that deals with a father and daughter. Okay? So I'm going to go through basically the Pashat, explain about this, and just bear with me. I think when we come to the whole outcome of this, it's going to be, I think, good. Anyway, so if a child makes a vow verbally, they're not held accountable. because they're children. Okay, so basically, a boy is considered a man at 13. My son just basically turned 13. Got him to fill in now. So this is where he's now accountable. I told my son, now you're a man. Everything that I've shared, all the Torah you've seen me study, the praying before you, and all of these things, you've seen me teach you about Torah. Yeah, he's 13 already. He's a big boy. Now he is fully responsible. I told him, Yom Kippur, you're going to take it way more seriously. So anyways, he's 13, so he's considered a man. And a daughter under the age of 12 is considered just a child. But 12 and a half, she's now basically, according to Torah, a woman. And so if a child makes a vow, they're not really held accountable. They're not responsible for the verbal promises. But once they reach a certain age, like the son, bar mitzvah, the daughter, bat mitzvah age, now if they make a vow or a pledge or and they make a promise, they have to keep it. With a daughter, there is opportunity for her to annul the vow. Okay, in the following method, if her father hears about it, a vow that she made at the age of 12, he has the right to annul it. That's why the Torah does kind of hint to this. It says, the father's silent, then it stands, but if he speaks up, it doesn't. Right? So he has a right to annul the vow. He declares it null. He declares it nothing. And she is no longer responsible. This, however, can only last 6 months. By the time she is 12 and a half, she's known as a boigeres, which is basically almost an adult, according to Torah. All right? And now the father cannot annul her vows. It's now her responsibility. From the stage of 12 to 12 and a half, halakhically, this is known as nira. Those 6 months, her father can annul her vows. And there's one more law recorded in Matot, which is marriage. If she enters into marriage, she makes a vow and a promise. If she makes a vow and a promise after her marriage, her husband can also annul her vows. Now, the Torah says some may see this as a perspective that the husband owns and controls the wife. That's why he's able to annul it, but that's not really what's going on here. But this is not really what it's talking about. The halakhic view, a husband can only annul 2 types of vows. One, if she makes a vow concerning their relationship that may compromise it, undermine it. Basically, let's say if she's living with her husband and says, I refuse to have relations with you forever. The husband's like, nah, that's not going to happen. Because that vow isn't just to herself. She's actually hurting her partner. And as Rambam states, if she makes a promise to never engage in intimacy with her husband, it's a vow, an oath. The husband, this is directly hurting him, and so he can annul the vow. And number 2, if she makes a vow to torture herself, to deprive herself of food, she makes a vow, she says, I'm not going to eat these things. The Torah recognizes this woman is sometimes very hard on herself, and therefore her husband can annul the vow. Okay? And when he hears about it, he says it's nothing and she's no longer responsible. So these are the 2 types of vows a husband can annul. So what about when the girl is called an arusa, which means betrothed? Okay, so there's actually 2 stages of marriage in Jewish law. So the first time I learned about all this halakha, it was interesting. You know, the more you learn, the more you understand about Jewish marriage. And the marriage basically in Jewish law has two phases of marriage. Okay, the first phase is called an erusin. Okay, and the second phase is called an nesuyan. All right, the first one is betrothal, so the husband can ask the daughter in marriage, but she doesn't live with him at this stage. Okay, uh, the husband betroths the wife, places a ring on her finger or something else of monetary value, and it's consecrated. And now they are officially husband and wife. And for them to separate, they would need a get. She would have to have a divorce. This stage is called an erusan, and it does not yet bring them together fully in the same house. They're not living in the same house. She's still living in her home. He is still living in his. They're married, but they're not living together as a married couple. In fact, yep.
Wasn't that a stage where Miriam and Joseph before?
Actually, yeah, I was actually just about to say that. This is most likely the stage that Miriam and Joseph, Yeshua's parents, were also going through, right? And so that's exactly right. They would have held this custom, and they're a married couple, but she's not living with him yet, and she cannot marry anyone else. She needs a get. If they want to separate, she needs a divorce. If she's with someone else, it's considered adultery, even if they're not living together. The second stage is a nisuyan, which is a full-fledged marriage. They have the kupa. They do the 7 blessings. The groom and bride go in an exclusive room on their own, and afterwards they are a full-fledged couple. Okay, I think even the Rambam in those times, there would be witnesses outside the tent, making sure the marriage is fully consummated, and then they move into the same home, and they become one flesh. They build a family. In biblical and Talmudic times, these two phrases were done at 2 different times. First, it was betrothal, and only the later stage was the completion of the marriage, nisuyan. And so usually it would take about 12 months for this all to go through, to pass by. Nowadays, they do it all in one shot. The marriages, even Jewish marriages, they do it all together in one shot, right? And they go in the kupa, the groom places the ring on the finger and betroths her, and they take a break, read in the kasuba, the 7 blessings, and then the private room. Okay, so now back to the vows. If a wife is completely married to her husband, not just betrothed, but fully married, then her husband has the right to annul her vow. Now, I know this is probably really detailed in everything that I'm going through, but if you just pay attention, this is going to be awesome. So we have to understand.
May I ask a quick question about, was there any threat for Miriam to be stoned because she was pregnant? And if Yusuf gave get, right? Because he didn't want that to happen. That's why he was considering giving the divorce. I was just wondering.
What's the question? Could she been stoned? Are you saying?
Yes.
Yeah.
Even without a witness?
Well, I mean, she had a baby popping out of her stomach, so
no witness needed.
It's kind of hard to hide that one. And if the husband says, like, "Hey, I haven't even been with her yet," remember, there's 2 stages of marriage.
Right. So that stage, he's not supposed to have any relationship, right? So everybody would say that that's why they will be stoning.
Yeah. Yeah. And think of this. If I don't care if people believe that she was a virgin or not, doesn't matter to me. But if she was a virgin, then what am I saying here? That Yosef, why? What am I saying here?
Yeah, why would he consider to give a divorce? Because
yeah,
he knew it wasn't his. I mean, the baby wasn't his, and she was virgin, so it had to be by the Spirit.
This is the thing that.
Yeah, but he didn't know that. He thought she went on with someone else.
And he didn't believe that, obviously. Well, we see the angel talks to Miriam, and yeah, she could have been stoned if Joseph went through and said, listen, this is not my child. I mean, all it has to do, in according to Torah, is suspect adultery. Even if the husband is suspicious of adultery, then she has to follow the procedure of the sota, right? She has to go.
Right.
Yep.
That right? That like when they do that, the contract before they consummate, before the wedding comes, like a year later, they are considered married. So if he does, they are considered marriage, right?
They are.
That's why he was gonna give her the divorce, because at that point they were married, and under the eyes of everybody in the law, they were already married.
That's right.
They still had that phase of not physically getting, consummate the wedding. But she was his wife for all the laws and everything. She was already his wife.
Absolutely. That's right. And yeah, they were probably in the first stage. She was an Arusa. She was married to him, betrothed, but they probably weren't living under the same house, right? So they're not. Yeah, it's interesting that it goes to the Brit Hadashah. There was a thought in my head, but I lost it. But maybe you guys can bring it up. Feel free to ask questions and everything. But I also want to explain about the vow and the oath, when it can be annulled, and through these stages, because there's something amazing the Torah is suggesting here, but it's not really in your face. So I'm breaking down the Pashat to show you something beautiful. At least I think so. So they're not completely married. They're not yet living together. So what's the status at that point? To annul her vows, how? So if the betrothed daughter is living with her father still, and she makes a vow, and even if her husband knows about it, he cannot annul the vow, right? But the father can. But if the husband wants that vow annulled, he also needs to ask the father for help. They need to be a team, basically. He needs to partner with the father, and this way the vow can be annulled. Shlomo, Shabbat Shalom, bro. So the Shulchan Aruch Yoredeus, Hilchos Nedarim, both betrothal, until she enters the kuppah, the husband does not allow her vows alone, and neither the father alone. They both annul her vows in partnership. You guys understand what I'm saying here?
Bro.
Yes.
If my wife makes a vow to never have relations with me, I'm going to annul it.
Yeah, well, even I believe it's in Corinthians or whatever.
Or I'm gonna make a vow to divorce her.
Well, it's she's not.
Yeah.
It's kind of true. It's kind of true. I think it's somewhere Shaul says something about. He talks about a woman if they make a vow or they're fasting or that they're not supposed to hurt each other. They're not supposed to be selfish. I think it's in Corinthians or something like this.
Wow.
Maybe somebody knows the reference I'm talking about, but it talks about, Shaul says that you're not supposed to be selfish and harm your partner because you're not taking this vow. It's okay to take a vow, but if you're harming someone else, it's no good.
Yeah, it's gonna kill me, man.
Yeah, I think it'll kill any man, to be honest.
Yes,
Fill in the blank.
I'm trying to keep my mind kosher and my mouth kosher here.
Hey, Yosef, I got a question.
That's
Yeah.
1 Corinthians 7:5, about not depriving each other. Is that what
Perfect.
Very
Yeah,
good.
exactly. Exactly. Very good. Yeah, Angel, you said something?
Yeah, I was gonna ask. So, the period between when she's 12 and a half and she's not betrothed or married yet, no one can annul a vow that she makes. Is that what you're saying?
Not no one. The period, you said the period from
When she's 12 and a half, right? She's no longer under her father's permission. She's already an adult. And then before she's married, is she able to make she's able to make a vow, right? But is anyone able to nullify it?
I mean, if she's still under the father's house, he can still do it. But
Okay.
she is now fully responsible for her vows and oaths. I mean, under that age, it's not totally serious because, I mean, you're considered a child, right? And children, they like to say stupid things a lot of times, right?
Very true.
Chris, Shabbat Shalom. We're talking in Bamidbar chapter 30, verses 9 to, I think, or verse 4 to 10, verse 4 to 9, just to let you know what we're talking about here.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Glad to have you.
Shalom.
Okay, so we're talking about vows and oaths. Anyway, so yeah, so if the husband of the betrothed daughter wants the vow annulled, but he's not yet living with her, he has to partner with the father, and they both now can annul the vow. If one annulled her vows without the other one doing it, her vows are not annulled. If you're dealing with a young girl, 12 years old, a single girl makes a vow, her father has a right to annul the vow. Okay, good. So if this girl gets betrothed and then married, an erusan to a nisuyan, and makes a vow after the wedding, her husband has a right to annul the vow. If she's living with him, he doesn't need the father. He's in the relationship now. The question is whether the girl is in a middle state. If she's betrothed and not fully married, then the Jewish law tells us, so if the husband knows about the vow, but she's not living under the roof, he has to have the father's permission, the father's help to annul this vow. Okay? Yeah, just going through some notes here. And so, yeah, if she made, so there's partnership. So if a daughter makes a vow in her father's house, but is betrothed and says, like, the husband can only annul the vows that she accepted upon herself after she's in his house. He cannot annul her vows she made before the marriage. If she was 12 years old and made a vow never to eat cheesecake again, a few months later, she gets married. She's now living in her husband's house. He cannot annul this vow. His power to annul her vows is because of their relationship only. Okay? Only the vows created under his home are in his power. They affect him. If she made them before by herself, he cannot annul. However, in the case of betrothal, when the groom annuls her vow together with the father, they can annul the vows, even the ones she made before she was betrothed. So if she's 12 years old and makes a vow never to eat cheesecake again, and then a few months later she's betrothed, her father hears about the vow and her husband hears together, they can nullify that vow. The husband can annul the vow even she made before he even knew her. A full-fledged husband who is living with her in the same home can only nullify the vows that were done from the day they were married from. The day she went into the kupa, not before. So is everybody kind of on the same page of what I'm saying here? Everybody get it? So what's the logic? The law that the betrothed husband has more power to annul even the previous ones, more power than a full-fledged husband. So actually, it even states in the Talmud Chumash, so where is it here? It goes on, if you guys have the Talmud Chumash, I don't know if you do or not, on page 406 in Bamidbar, it even tells us in Nedarim 67b that under the Torah law, Jewish marriage takes place in two stages, like I explained. One pasuk repeats the word married, literally, but if betrothed, she shall be betrothed. So it even says twice to show you that there's two stages, and there's a process of elimination. Under the Torah law, Jewish marriage takes place in two stages. Okay, so it goes on to explain that there, what I've been saying anyway. So she made a vow, and only her father nullified it. This is Anira, a 12-year-old girl, and her groom who betrothed her did not hear about this vow until she went in his home. He can't nullify the vow she made previously. Why? Because the husband doesn't have the right to annul the vow. Okay, so I think we're pretty clear on this. Just to review the steps. The partnership together. After she gets married, he cannot nullify the former vows, the vows she made before they were fully married. He can only annul the vows when she's living with him. But before he needs to team up with the father, basically. Okay, so let's see here. Just skipping some stuff. I don't want to sound like a broken record here. So basically, you have these two stages of marriage, and you have the son, the father, and the daughter. I'm not going to say this is the Trinity. I'm not saying the Trinity. I've heard that before. I'm just kidding. I'm not saying that. No, but they're basically on a deeper level, there are two types of Jews. There are two types of Jews. Those who were betrothed to God and those who were married to God. Okay? Those who were betrothed to God and those who were married to God. Those who were in the state of a Erusan and a Nesuyan. So, what's that? Somebody say something? Good? I don't know. Okay. Legally, what is the difference with these two phases? The first stage, the woman is married to her husband, but they still consist of the fact that she cannot marry anyone else. she is committed to him. It's not defined by them living together, though. They're still separate. They're married in a sense. If she wants to marry somebody else, she needs a divorce, but not married that they are together. This stage is called the Erusan. It's also Kedushin. And why Kedushin? Consecration, holy, separated from everyone else. It's off limits to everyone else, but you're still not completely with your husband. Okay? You have this person who has a relationship, but they're not fully in the stage of intimacy. They're not all there yet. This is a person, the first stage of marriage represents the Jew that has a commitment with God, but they're still on the borderline. They're still attracted to the world. They still have these addictions, temptations, appetites. They're just not fully dedicated to God. You could say lukewarm. And there's so many of these people in the world. They go to church or whatever, or go to synagogue, and they say they love the Torah or the Bible, whatever. I never miss a day of worship, but during the week they're just really not that committed. They're doing the worldly things. They're attracted to the world. They're not fully on board. They're in a constant fight. They can't say I'm living with God. I know God. We have a relationship, but we're not at that stage yet. We're not at that marriage stage. The second stage is there's unity, enjoying your oneness with God, with Hashem. The first person is not there yet, but the second stage is when you move into a new home, you become one. The difference is the second person has completion. They're in a new place. And the second is staying away from all the negativity, staying away from the world. They have a relationship with Hashem. They're fully in love with Hashem. And you know, the beautiful thing about the father, the husband, you know, we have a lot of past vows or oaths that we have made in the past. And what I mean, the sages even say that the things that we speak, even just speaking, not even making an actual vow or oath, but things that we have said have almost become like vows and oaths. What do I mean? They'd be destructive. How are they vows and oaths? We made an oath, a promise at Mount Sinai. You know what that vow was, that oath that we said? Everybody should know these two words. Exactly. Naseh v'nishma. We will do and we will obey. That means we will not speak anything against Hashem or his promises. We made an oath. But even before that, before we even knew Hashem, we said a lot of stupid things with our mouths, did a lot of destruction. We've said harmful things and maybe even said, I swear to God, I'll do this. You know, all of these stupid things from our mouths. The mouth is what creates and also destroys. You understand? So now we come in a relationship with Hashem. And you know, if we're living under the roof, we're kind of all figuratively the daughter of Hashem. We are the bride of Hashem. But if we want the past vows annulled, we even have a partnership with Mashiach and Hashem. There's a verse also in Colossians I believe it's one of the favorite Christian verses that is so misinterpreted. Well, especially in the past, I think people are starting to finally understand what Colossians is really saying. But doesn't it say in chapter 2, verse 13, and you being dead in your trespasses, you were Vera, and the uncircumcision of your flesh, he hath quickened together with him, having forgiven all your trespasses, blotting out the handwriting of ordinances that was against us. You could even say the oaths or vows that were against us, which was contrary to us, taking it out of the way and nailing it to the stake or the cross, whatever you want to say. This is removing all of those vows, annulling it all. This is what Hashem did for us. And now all those past oaths and vows that were against us are now annulled. And it was through a partnership, through Mashiach bringing us closer to Hashem, allowing us to go from one stage to the next, clinging to the Zaddik, clinging to the Zaddik to bring us to Hashem, and Hashem completely forgives us. And so we also have to watch our mouths, watch what we say, because we are making vows. Actually, I can find the one book here. Yeah, even, let's see here. The word describing a vow is Isar, which means also describing a prohibition in chapter 30, verse 3. These letters also spell Eres, which means poison, because one creates such a prohibition actually creates potentially a deadly poison. We have to be careful of what we say. The word neder, a vow, neder can also spell nered, a perfume with which a person adorns himself. However, there's always the risk that he will not keep his word. In that case, neder will spell nered, which means let us go down. For in this case, a vow can lead to a person's downfall. Okay, so we have to really basically watch our mouths. What does Hashem have the world we're doing right now? Masking up our mouths, telling us to shut up, because the world is in a lot of trouble, specifically because of the Lashon Hara we've been spewing. Our mouths, what does the book of Yaakov say? Yaakov, James the Just, doesn't he say that the tongue is a flaming fire, a consuming fire? Right? So we really have to watch our mouths, but this is the deeper meaning of the father, the husband, and the daughter, of annulling vows, keeping vows, the stages. And so what we have to do is speak words of life. And what does Yeshua do? He goes to prepare a place for us so that we can go under the kuppah, that we can stay under the kuppah, be married to Hashem, which we actually did. We went under a kuppah at Mount Sinai. When Rashi says that, the Torah says that we stood underneath the mountain, and Rashi says that Hashem hung the mountain over top of Israel, just like a chuppah, just like a marriage. You know, Kedushin, the Talmud Masechet Kedushin says that there are 3 ways to marry a woman, according to Torah. One is through kesef, money. One is through intercourse. And one is through money. A document. And Hosea, I believe Hosea chapter 2 says that Hashem, the men wrap around the tefillin around their wedding finger 3 times. Because it says in Hosea 2 that Hashem will marry us. He married us 3 times. The word marriage is mentioned 3 times. And Hashem married Israel in all 3 ways. When he brought Israel out of Mitzrayim, the Egyptians handed over their gold. This was the money that Israel deserved for being slaves for 210 years. Right? And then the second is they went to Mount Sinai. And what does Hashem do? Moshe brings down a written document, the Torah. And the third is the closeness. Moshe coming up the mountain in a loving way, the bride and groom. And so that is Parsha Matos. I'll let everybody ask questions, and then I'm going to talk about Parsha Masai.